Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of a man.
I'm Caleb Salmon. This is Year Zero. Today, I'm replaying an interview I was on last week. I was on Faith, Liberty, and Praxis with Caleb Brown, Caleb Salmon, and Jon Hartmann. And we were discussing Carl Jung's The Undiscovered Self, which is a short, like 90, 100-page book that's worth reading. And, as everything that Carl Jung writes, it's very dense and there's so much to be taken care of and talked about and looked at and kind of contemplated. But we kept it under 5 hours. And so Caleb was nice enough to send me the audio file so that I could publish it as a podcast up at the Libertarian Institute. Because the libertarianinstitute.org is where you go for all your libertarian news. The libertarianinstitute.org. It's not ryanbunting.com. It's the libertarianinstitute.org. And go there now because we're having a fund drive and we're raising money because we got to keep the lights on and keep new writers coming in. Man, Scott has been killing it getting great new writers at the Libertarian Institute. So go to the libertarianinstitute.org/donate and, throw us a few bucks, dude. And as I said, ryanbunting.com, which he has, he has another website. I got to look it up. Every time I talk about his other website, I have to look it up because I'm so used to just ryanbunting.com. For all of your racist graphic design needs, go to ryanbunting.com. It has such a great ring to it. I don't even want to change it, but he insists. He's like, I have a new website. Why don't you give my new website? But he doesn't talk like that because he's not whatever the hell accent that was. Autonomyvirtual.com. That's autonomyvirtual.com is also ryanbunting.com. So maybe he could set it up to where ryanbunting.com just goes to that website and I can just keep saying ryanbunting.com is where you will find your racist graphic designs. But I don't know. He's complicated. And thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. As always, I get more comments on the music than I do on the podcast, which might tell me something about my ability to podcast. But, whatever. I'm stubborn. Enjoy the show.
And we're live. I'm sitting down with Tommy of Year Zero.
What's up?
Here to, was that Roden? John? I don't know. You have a podcast? I don't remember if you have a podcast or not.
Well, I have like a YouTube channel that I kind of work on periodically, but not consistently, no.
Okay.
That's called Mind Your Business.
Mind Your Business. And I'm putting with my friend Caleb from Twitter, Caleb Salmon.
Yep.
So, this is going to be a lot of fun. We're talking about Undiscovered Country. Sorry for reference. Undiscovered Self by Carl Jung. I got a pipe ready to smoke, but I can't smoke it indoors, but it works. So let's get into it. We share the link, and then we'll get into this. Oh, completely forgot. If anyone here wants to kind of say what they do before we go live, so you introduce yourself a little bit, feel free to do so before we get into the book. I mean,
I don't do anything.
You've been in a chicken coop, so I mean that's something.
Oh man, this is a killer time of year for me. So, it's all about gardening and animals and being out in the sun, and I love it, but it's exhausting. It really wears you out. So,
yeah. So,
you want to go next, Caleb?
Go right ahead.
All right. I teach, and right now I'm building two tombs facades that are we're going to use on Easter. Trying to rig them so that the stones roll away on their own at the click of a button, and then the kids can look inside, and Jesus isn't there.
It's pretty cool.
That's gonna be awesome. That sounds like a real cool thing.
That's the goal.
John, what about you? Anything you want to add?
Me, yeah. Well, I do a lot of art, as you can see in my background here. For
looks great.
Watching, thanks. That's on Instagram mostly. I'm working on that. I'm working on selling it and doing other things with digital prints and stuff like that. But I do I do podcasts periodically. I've been on Tommy's show before. I like to talk about Carl Jung, so whenever I get a chance, I try to jump on it because it's good stuff. I do have a YouTube channel called Mind Your Business with Jon Hartmann. I'm really into like meditation and like Eastern philosophy, so I talk a lot about that kind of stuff. I haven't done a video in a while. They're short videos, but I've been meaning to get back in that. I'm just I do so many things. I kind of focus on one thing right now, and then I'll get bored with it and I'll go focus on something else, and so there'll be more videos on that, but right now I'm really focusing on my art and getting that out there.
Nice. Well, let's get into it. Undiscovered Self by Carl Jung. This is my first time reading a Jung book. I googled what would be a good book for beginners, and this book came up. Got it 2 months ago. Didn't get any of it. Put it down. Saw Caleb posted about it on Twitter, and decided, okay, this is my chance to do this book. So I tagged some people. We got this organized, and now we're doing it. So, anybody have any takeaways from the book in general before we kind of get into the specifics about it?
I think that this book is so pertinent to what's been going on lately. And it's funny because the things that he talks about in this book, they're 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
And even earlier, and it's still going on today. So that I think is pretty good, that everyone can actually read it and see that history is kind of repeating itself in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
I feel like he does touch on a lot of what he touches on is relevant today. Also, it kind of gives you a different perspective of what it means. I felt reading it that if you didn't have a definition of the self, that you were going to be missing out on some of what he was talking about. And if you didn't understand, to me, it focuses a lot on the self and the shadow by his definitions of the self and shadow. Correct me if I'm wrong, John, because I know you've read a lot of this stuff that I'm referencing here. But so you have to understand what he means when he says the self or yourself. He's talking about, he breaks it down into a person has like 4 attributes. So you got the ego, the shadow, the anima, and the self, right? And the self is the full knowing of oneself. It's breaking through all the psychological barriers in order to really truly know who you are. And if you aren't aware of that going in, you're going to get a very different interpretation than if like someone like John or I reads it and we're seeing what he's talking about. He's really talking about the discovery of all your dimensions and every side of yourself, and that incorporates the darker side. And he's talking about how without going down this path of discovering who you truly are, you're going to be left without the ability to fight ideological fanaticism. And so you're basically, you're not going to be able to critically think your way out of it. And one of the things I found wild about this read was, in his determination, discovering oneself is discovering a faith bigger than oneself.
Mm-hmm.
It was discovering something that transcends humanity, and that you needed that transcendence to escape the possible slavery to the totalitarian state.
Yeah. So I think one of the things you were talking about, like the path to the self-discovery, in other books, he calls that individuation process.
Yes.
And that's where you kind of bring all this things in together. You know, as far as like you were talking about the anima, what that is the anima is like the feminine side of the male psyche. And the opposite of that would be the animus for women. So Tommy's right. I do think that like maybe someone that's you know read enough Jung will kind of see the self as a different thing. But I really don't think it's necessary like it is in other books, you know, because you can read this and kind of follow along pretty easily. I might be wrong about that, you know, seeing it from my perspective. I can't look at it with any other perspective than my own. So I see where Tommy's saying, like, if you know this, if you don't understand the self in previous writing or other writings of Jung, it's going to be it might go over your head. But I think this is short enough and it's succinct enough to really, you know, still get something from it. Like how he's talking about. I'll just read this real quick. It's the first, you know, first page, first couple sentences here. What will the future bring? From time immemorial, this question has occupied men's minds, though not always to the same degree. Historically, it is chiefly in times of physical, political, economic, and spiritual distress that men's eyes turn with anxious hope to the future, and when anticipations, utopias, and apocalyptic visions multiply. I think that he sets it up really, really well there, because that's exactly what we're going through. That's exactly what they were going through in the past. It's not just one thing, you know, we're getting hit from all different sides, be it spiritual, material, whatever. So I think that when he frames it that way, the self isn't as important to understand, right? You know, right away from the get-go.
Caleb, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think when I was reading it and putting it in the context of the 1950s, like a lot of what he says is in the context of the Cold War, the USSR. Mm-hmm. Like that's the reality he's living in. I remember I read another book written in like 1980, and it said in the intro, it said that the reality of our lives is the first and second world. Communism is the reality of our lives. Like, and that was 30 years later. That was just, hey, our entire world is defined by this thing that's going on. But when you mentioned how relatable what he says is to today, even though the Cold War ended, the USSR fell, and you look at what he's saying about how that was happening in the West during the Cold War, it almost feels like we didn't change anything, even though the enemy was gone. The same things that we were doing in the Cold War that he's talking about and saying, hey, this is what's beating people down, they're still going on.
Mm.
Probably something to do with the communist ideology infecting the, you know, institutions of America. So like the Marxist universities, the secular dogma, all of it is either socialist, communist, or just liberal, which is these things, just minor differences, but just so much of it's just sad ideology. It's really, it is the going ideology of the age. You know, it's everywhere you look.
Well, you touch on this in the fifth essay. He touches on this, and he alludes to the fact that the more comfortable people are, the less likely they are to change. So, like, if you look at your parents' generation and the way they grew up in America, they were very very comfortable. And it was very much like we were raised, a lot of us were raised like, well, yeah, you just believe what they say and you just have faith in the system because the system's always held us up. And so there's a type of cognitive dissonance, which in the words he uses, but there's a cognitive dissonance. And basically, if you really read closely, he's talking about mass formation psychosis in a lot of this book. But there's a cognitive dissonance that occurs whenever that security that you're used to starts falling away and you're clinging on to that old thing. Mm-hmm. And you have to let go of that old thing. And he talks about this. And I think this is what Jon was referring to whenever he said, like, we really need to cover this fifth essay. Like, this is like super important. I don't know if I'm wrong there, Jon, but that's what I really got out of that fifth essay. It was like, he was really like concentrated on like that thing of old that's so comfortable that you're so used to. It's not always going to be there. And you got to be aware and you got to be able to have your eyes open enough to say, okay, like, we got to step back from this. Yeah.
I mean, I think the fifth, sixth, and seventh is really, really pertinent. I mean, the whole book is, I mean, but I wanted to kind of talk more about the fifth than anything. I'm not opposed to talking to all of it, but I think that like here, I highlighted a couple parts in this fifth part here. And so I'm just going to read them and, we can figure out if we want to talk about them or not. So only when conditions have altered so drastically that there is an unendurable rift between the outer situation and our ideas, now become antiquated, does the general problem of our Weltanschauung, which I guess means philosophy of life, arise, and with it, the question of how the primordial images that maintain the flow of instinctive energy are to be reoriented and readapted. Now, I think in regards to religion, what he was kind of trying to get at in this chapter is kind of shifting away from like the literal meaning, the literal word, and kind of putting it in a way that modern man can understand. And I think that some people may argue that that's not a good thing, that the word is the word. But I really think that, in order for the values of the word to carry on to this generation, we have to put it in the terms that people can understand. And the churches aren't doing it now, and the state is. The state is taking over where religions left off. You could argue whether or not you can gain morality from somewhere aside from the church, but that has been the way that society has been functioning for 2,000 years, right? So we're seeing a shift now to the state, and as a result, people are starting to be less and less prone to the morality that was once, basically universal.
Now, do you think? I think this is like kind of a reference to the consciousness of what's happening around you is diabolically opposed to the psyche. Like, I really feel like that's what he's really talking about, because there's this quote and where it says, modern man can know himself only insofar as he can become conscious of himself. His consciousness, therefore, orients itself chiefly by observing and investigating the world around him. So he's talking about how your psyche is operating within yourself with the world around you, and how you're intaking this. And there's a part of yourself, there's a part of your psyche that's so attached to what you believe is true, or what you quote unquote know is true, that when you see what's happening around you, you accept that 2 + 2 = 5 because it's much easier on your psyche and on you internally. And only those that have done the work are going to be those that are willing to point out the emperor has no clothes.
I will say I really throughout the entire book he obviously makes appears between how the state is a religion, the state is the new religion kind of saying, and he there's a quote about people maybe I might have inferred this, I might not have been saying this, but what I got out of it is people have been robbed of their belief in God, of robbed in religion through science, and the quote I read was, "You could take away a man's gods, but only to give him others in return."
Yeah,
and that's it's a great quote. I read that. I had to pause. I was listening to it. I had to pause it, go back, get my notebook out, write that down, because I'm like, that is spot on. When you say science disproves religion, you have now made science the new religion for a lot of people. And it's like, well, if that beat this, I have to go there now, and that's just how that brain works. And it's when you was hearing that kind of a lot of things, like the COVID was being crazy people. A lot of things kind of clicked. I'm like, I knew that, but hearing it in that way really kind of like clicked into space. I'm like, oh yeah, it really is, psychologically speaking, it's their religion. They've switched to this because that is what's being taught, what they're being preached to, and what's keeping them safe. And so it's really just become their new totality of their religion.
Yeah, I think I can't remember what page it was on or whatever, but he talks about how he goes into depth about the mass man and what that entails, and how when society starts getting bigger and bigger, the individual matters less and less, and it becomes more of a statistic than what is a reality. So for instance, he talks about like how statistics can show you, like, for when you're trying to classify things or you're trying to like kind of figure things out, statistics are a great thing, but they don't show you the reality. The two extremes aren't there, right? They cancel each other out, I think he says.
Yeah.
And then what you're being told is real. Like he talks about how, if you go and measure like a bunch of rocks.
Yeah, he uses pebbles. He said just because it's the average doesn't mean you're going to find one.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically, and that's kind of what we're dealing with, as far as that goes, because people aren't really able, since they're not able to be individuals in the crowd, they're not mentally prepared to think outside of being in the crowd. So they're not meant to think about anything other than, okay, well, this is the direction everyone's going, so I'm just going to keep going that way. And that goes to what you were saying about how science kind of takes over, because we got into this mind frame that, the science says this, the science says that, and that's fine. We need science. You have to have knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
You can't just live your life off of knowledge only. You have to be able to understand what that knowledge is, how to use it. And people are just kind of, right now, they're just going straight on autopilot, like following the crowd, and not being able to think for themselves in that regard.
Like so many people.
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask, is that when he was, I'm trying to remember if that was the part where he was basically warning that all these frames of knowledge, whether it be religion or science, would become a creed, and to avoid the creed. I mean, really is what I got out of it. Avoid becoming a creed, because like if you're adhering to the rules of man and just using the language of God, then all you have is a creed. And it's that like I said that earlier, that the transcendence that actually makes it a religion and a faith.
Yeah, well, I think he kind of defines creed as just like I mean, you could talk about it as like even a political ideology, right? Like, and how you're just identifying as that, you just go through the motions because that's what your creed says, versus your religion, where there's more to it. There's more. I can't remember the word he uses. I don't want to say ethereal because that wasn't the word he used, but something like that.
There's an experience behind it, not just a movement.
I mean, this is something Caleb and I were talking about in a group chat earlier. Was about you think about how does what was it? The majority of Jewish people are culturally Jewish. Right? There's more atheist Jews now than religious Jews, but the majority is cultural Jewish. And we started talking about like what is the numbers of like culturally Christian people? You know, for Catholics, who's the Catholics who only show up for the obligated masses and that's it? And like, you know, like Nancy Pelosi is obviously a cultural Catholic. She goes when she's supposed to go, but then she's evil outside the church.
Right.
You know, how many Christians are there to Easter Sunday cultural Christians? And we're seeing there's a huge Christian majority of people. It's like, no, there's a really small minority of actual Christian people in this country. And it is a lot of them just claim Christianity when they go on Easter and Christmas only.
Well, that's a huge meme in modern society. We live in a Christian culture, right? Like I've heard conservatives say that thousands of times.
Yeah.
So that's a huge meme, and that's like definitely looking at it that way. It definitely makes a lot of sense.
I'd be willing to bet it's probably 3 out of 4 people who say they're Christian in the West.
I was hoping to be higher than that, but I think you're right.
I'd be willing to bet 3 out of 4 people who will, if you ask them what religion they are, they'll say Christian, or if they
or some variation.
Yeah, or if they're going to church, it's Christmas and Easter, and they're not really. There's nothing going on spiritually. Just, hey, we go to church on Christmas and Easter. I'd probably say 3 out of 4 Christians are in that category.
I would say that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Fall under that category, to be honest with you.
And you can honestly see it. If we weren't culturally Christian, those evil, not just the people who are following through on the motions, just your Joe Schmo on the street, but the Nancy Pelosi's and the Joe Bidens, if we weren't culturally Christian, they wouldn't claim it.
Yeah.
For any reason. I think that is the number one evidence that America was ever what you would call a Christian nation, is that there are significant numbers of politicians who will still claim to be Christian for any perceived benefit, because these people are probably psychopaths who everything is a calculated decision.
This is something Sam Harris was talking about. I know we don't like Sam Harris, but he made the point like Christianity has such a lasting impact that every partisan feels the need to claim Christianity when they're obviously not Christian. I'm like, even if Sam Harris can say it, it's probably, you know, it's not a bad claim because he gets a lot wrong, but every once in a while he stumbles across something that's actually pretty good.
Yeah. Well, it's like when Trump was running, right? What do you say, the 2 Colossians or whatever it was? The 2 Corinthians or what? It's like, yeah, clearly you're only doing that to fucking, you know, get the Bible thumpers on your side. And that, you know, but I mean, that's how they all are. That's Joe Biden does the same thing. They all do that, you know, because they know that it's just another identifier. It's just another identity.
Yep. It's a box to tick.
You know, in the second chapter, there's this really cool thing. It says, for in order to turn the individual into a function of the state, his dependence on anything beside the state must be taken from him. But religion means dependence on and submission to the irrational facts of experience. That's what I was talking about earlier. It's the irrational facts. You know, it's the irrationality of religion that people don't like right now. And what the state does is they bang you over the head with trying to tell you like, well, no, you can't prove that. There's no rationality here. Therefore, it doesn't exist, and you should just disregard it.
Yeah, that's spot on. One point I was going to make earlier was that we're talking about like when he opened the book talking about the sinking minority and the unsinking majority. It was like he said, like he said like 40% are sinking people in the West are not. And I was thinking about how so many people today. I have a friend who's still in high school, and he keeps failing tests because if he can't find a Quizlet, for those who don't know, Quizlet is an online website. You can go to type in whatever class to do, and you can almost always find a test word for word exactly what they're going to be on. So here, just like do it home on laptops up with the test open, and his phone has the Quizlet, so you can just copy the answers. That's the only way to pass the test. And I was like, why don't you do? He's like, I have access to all the knowledge of human history on my phone. Anywhere I go, I have access to everything. If I ever need it, I have it here. I was like, you have all this knowledge on your phone, you don't know jack shit. Like, how many people just go through life saying, if I need to know something, I'll look it up in the spot, and they never actually learn anything, and they really they don't know anything.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of the way technology is kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because you can know more things, you can recall more facts and everything, but you're not. It's not coming from an understanding. I mean, anybody can read something and then just sound like they know what they're talking about.
I mean, that's all I do.
With the phone sitting there, that's what we all do, right?
Well, we
we
think in bullet points now. We don't think in complete thoughts.
Right.
Some of us are thinking tweets, 280
I was just gonna say it's Twitter's fault. But yeah, that part that you were talking about, the 40%, I found it. If you want me to read it, I don't know.
Oh, go ahead.
So it says, everywhere in the West there are subversive minorities who, sheltered by our humanitarianism and our sense of justice, hold the incendiary torches ready, with nothing to stop the spread of their ideas except critical reason of a single, fairly intelligent, mentally stable stratum of the population.
Nope, I think we lost him.
Oh, we froze up.
We lost Caleb and we lost Jon.
Oh no! So it's you and me, buddy.
Let's carry this podcast through. Oh,
here
he's back.
he is.
Oh.
We lost you for like the entire part of your reading.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So should I start over then?
Please.
Everywhere in the West, there is a subversive minority. There are subversive minorities who, sheltered by our humanitarianism and our sense of justice, hold the incendiary torches ready, with nothing to stop their spread of their ideas except the critical reason of a single, fairly intelligent, mentally stable stratum of the population. One should not, however, overestimate the thickness of this stratum. It varies from country to country in accordance with national temperament. Also, it is regionally dependent on public education and is subject to the influence of acutely disturbing factors of a political and economic nature. Taking plebiscites as a criterion, one could, on an optimistic estimate, put its upper limit at about 40% of the electorate, or rather, a more pessimistic view would not be unjustified either, since the gift of reason and critical reflection is not one of man's outstanding peculiarities, and even where it exists, it proves to be wavering and inconsistent. The more so, as a rule, the bigger the political groups are.
Do you think that 40% number is still accurate today, or do you think it's less? Because I'm very torn on that, because there's access to Twitter and all this information. It's so much easier to have people questioning the narrative nowadays than ever before. But how many people actually question it, or they just buy into a new narrative? Now there's been one narrative people buy into. There's like two narratives: the counter narrative and regular narrative, and both of them are probably false. But everyone just buys into one or two. Like, is it more thinking people today, or less? You think?
More or less thinking people. This is
I don't know. About half the country doesn't vote, so maybe they're the smart ones.
Because they're too busy thinking. They're like, let me see.
A person who thinks is nothing to think about except the thoughts they think. I saw that on a TikTok, and I was dying of laughter the entire time.
Well, I mean, I don't know. You're looking at a situation where 40%. I can't say that, like, I don't have the ability to say that we're not looking at a situation where this many people think. It's just, are you thinking with the right data? Are you utilizing the right data to come to your conclusions? And I think that's something that from chapter 2, he works his way up to, is whether or not is the way you find this data, where are you depending on getting your facts from, right? So again, I think one of the big underlying issues that he's talking about in this group of essays is mass formation psychosis. Yeah. And the inability of critical thought due to the lack of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. and I'm going to kind of go along with that on another quote here, because I think that kind of ties it in a little bit. It's from chapter 2 as well. The individual is increasingly deprived of the moral decision as to how he should live his own life, and instead is ruled, fed, clothed, and educated as a social unit, accommodated in the appropriate housing unit, and amused in accordance with the standards that give pleasure and satisfaction to the masses. That's right what you said. It's again going back to being a number instead of being an individual, and that goes hand in hand with not being able to think and do the things that you need to do. And as a result of that, with all these people not thinking the way that they should, or trying to figure things out for the better of everyone, they're just kind of again going along with every single without question. Slavery and rebellion are inseparable correlates. Hence, rivalry for power and exaggerated distrust pervade the entire organism from top to bottom.
And
what happens is the people that are the people that do think for themselves naturally find themselves in places of power, because they understand that they can manipulate the people, because most people don't think.
Yeah, the quote in there that these people are so they've lost themselves completely. There is no individual awareness in them, and he says an infinite number of zeros does not add up to one. The masses are completely susceptible to one person who is aware of it, aware of what's going on. And the quote you read before with the housing and the entertainment according to what is being provided to everyone, it makes me think of the you will live in the pod, you will eat the bugs, just consume the next product and move on with your day.
Yeah. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on the fact that he's not only warning against the collectivist mentality and what I would say is a fanaticism of the state, but he's also warning against radical individualism, because he does touch on the relativism of or the subjective nature or the relative morality and that individualism brings. So it's not just there's a line you walk, and he's telling you there's a line you got to walk. Like you still have to be part of this world, right? And so I really feel like what he's advocating is a smaller, decentralized community, tribal kind of element is what he's really trying to promote when you really dig into what he's saying here.
Yeah, he talks about, exactly walking that line, and you have to kind of keep both things in mind. And you have to try to get as narrow as you can, in that direction, as straight of a line as you can, because otherwise you're going to fall victim to either side.
It's a lot of stuff.
Like I said, man,
a very short book. I mean, it's like what? It's 102 pages, and it's
there's just so much everywhere.
I've never found somebody who writes in such a dense fashion, but can do it in such a way that it's intriguing.
Yeah.
Like it almost, the amount of information is like textbook level, but it's an interesting thing to read. It's not a textbook.
And that sucks for me, because I only ever graduated high school. I didn't do any other college after that, so it's a kind of struggle sometimes. I think that what he starts talking towards the end of how nothing has a more divisive and alienating effect upon society than this moral complacency and lack of responsibility, and nothing promotes understanding and rapprochement more than the mutual withdrawal of projections. So he talks a lot about how, like, we find fault in other people. Everything else it's always someone else's fault. It's never our own. And it's because we're not taught to be individuals, and we're only taught to go ahead along with the herd, that we don't ever examine ourselves and be like, hey, you know, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe something I'm doing is wrong. You know, and in a world right now where information goes so fast and you can figure everything out so quickly, and it can happen on the other side of the world, and then within 10 minutes, the whole damn world knows about it. This is becoming more and more difficult for us to kind of, you know, wade through.
As a Christian would put it, humanity has fallen, right? And he talks about this and he gets into it. And he's like, you got to be aware that, like, when you see the crimes happening by these dictators, these atrocities that are being carried out, you're no different. It's in you too. That darkness, and we were talking beforehand about that book, Ordinary Men. Like that darkness is in you. And I've heard Jordan Peterson reference this. I mean, and I think this is something that really changed my way of thinking about things, was to understand that, oh, well, I may be one of the 80% and not the 20%, right? I may be a follower. And if I were put in that situation, I might have been a Nazi, right? Even if it's
people were.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's coming to that realization that level of evil is in each of us as humans. And you have to not only get to know that side of yourself as much as you don't want to know that side of yourself, you have to conquer it. You can only conquer it by knowing what it is that you're conquering.
Right. I think I said this many times, a lot of places, but it's like you can't defeat a demon if you don't know what it looks like. You know, and we all, throughout human history, like humans have been really shitty towards each other, you know. And again, I'm going to say, you know, we can, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't look at ourselves as the perpetrators. But we all have it, and we all do it in certain ways. Now, I think the more reflection you're able to put upon yourself, the less that goes away, the less you could kind of, I don't want to say, like, you know, wash your hands of it, because you know, the second you think that you're in the clear is when you're going to go right back into it, you know, because now you're looking at yourself like you're better than everyone, you know. So I think humility plays a big role in a lot of that stuff. You know, we have to look at, I mean, even people that we don't like, you know, politically or whatever, you know, the best thing we can do is try to have empathy with them, put ourselves in their shoes and see, okay, I'm not saying that everybody that we disagree with is right 100%, but I know damn right I'm not 100% right all the time either. So if I know that about myself, then obviously that's how it is with other people as well. But, you know, you're never going to do that. You're always going to look at someone else as the enemy. Someone else is the perpetrator of all the wrong if you can't put yourself in their shoes. Yeah. Because maybe they're not doing something to be evil so much as they're doing something to protect themselves or as a reaction to something that they've seen or been a part of.
One of the ways I always try to, like, think about it is, have I ever done something in my life that if I would have seen someone else do, I would have disliked them immediately? Unequivocally, yes.
Really?
You know, I don't know a single person that hasn't committed some act that if they would have seen another person do, they would have been like, fuck that dude.
And if you meet anyone that says that's never happened to them, they're a liar.
C.S. Lewis talks about that when he says, if anyone struggles forgiving other people, just think about your own day and how often you forgive yourself for the things you do that you would not forgive if someone else did.
Yeah. Holding on to things that are like 10 years old or something like that, you know? Like, yeah. Let him without sin cast the first stone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think another thing is he doesn't really talk. He kind of like dips his toe in it, but doesn't really say it about like the collective unconscious and how we're all kind of part of this. Like it's in the back of our heads. Like you don't even think about the things that everybody else is thinking about. It's almost like we're connected, you know, electrically or something, that we all just have a feeling of something, but we don't even think about it. You know, it's just a part of like that kind of directs us. And how he talks about how, I think Europeans, he says something about like the Europeans like fucked with people from different countries and everything, you know, like they put a lot of hurting on them and everything. And that's something that we all have to deal with collectively, like as a group. Like we have to realize like, oh shit, you know, this may be, you know, left over from that, but most people aren't even in that unconscious. I mean, no one. Yeah. He says that, you know, if you don't pay attention to the unconscious, the unconscious will become your conscious, and you'll call it fate. You know, what we're doing now is we're kind of sweeping a lot of that uncomfortable type of shit under the rug so that we can try to move forward. But the only way we can actually move forward is by pulling that stuff up out of the rug and dealing with it, which is kind of like, you know, what we've been dealing with. You know, I'm not going to say that I think that, you know, we've been dealing with it correctly. You know, I think we're kind of, you know, it's the pendulum. You know, we were all the way over here, then, you know, people had enough of it. Now it's all the way over here. Now we're kind of on the backswing right now. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that unconscious level of what's going on.
It's the logos versus the pathos. You're right. So the self, whenever you're trying to get to know yourself, like think about it like trying to live the life of Christ, right? So Christ was the ultimate self. So, and the pathos would be the pathological side. So what you're experiencing is the Christ and the Antichrist, right? So you got to, and there are some people, and I'm not saying this is necessarily right, but I talk to a lot of people that think this way. There are some people that believe that there cannot be a Christ without an Antichrist, right? That one can't exist without the other. So like you have to look at the logos not as the opposite of the pathos, but the pathos is the inversion of the logos, right? So it resembles the logos with the wrong ends in mind, right? And so, and I think this is where people get like tongue-tied on religion, is they think inversion means opposite, and it's not. Like the inversion of Christ would be the Antichrist. It wouldn't be the opposite. It would resemble Christ, but it would be leading you to the wrong ends. And so you have to be very careful with the pathological, right? Because logos is in the word pathological. So it's taking part of the logos and it's twisting it and inverting it to lead you to the wrong ends. And I really think that's what he's really trying to encompass in this work.
Yeah. Does anybody want to talk about the last little bit of it? He talked about modern art, how it is in the front.
No, I'm just playing.
It's a great part of it.
I'm really excited to hear Jon talk about this because he is an artist.
Me too. I was really looking forward to that because I've been listening to a lot of Roger's Crew on beauty and objective beauty, and he has a whole in his documentary. He goes to a modern art museum and just like interviews a guy who literally has a can of shit on display. And he just starts like roasting the guy to his face about it. And I was cleaning my room up, looking stuff, and he brought up modern art, and I snapped back immediately. Like, okay, sit back down, get my notes open. I want to hear this part because it immediately was all great. But before I say what I want to say about Jon, if anything you want to say about the modern art part of the book? Yeah, so he talks about how like we're trying to like reframe what beauty is, right? We're trying to reframe. It's going from like objective to subjective, you know, and I feel like with art, it's kind of hard. Like I get it, you know, like you have like cathedrals and you have like these beautiful stained glass windows and you have like all the paintings and everything, and like that was what beauty was. That's what art was, you know. As time progresses, you know, we have so many other things available to us
that I'm not I kind of like I was struggling reading this because I'm like, he's kind of shitting on it. He's shitting on modern art, but in the same respect, it's like, well, you know, subjectivity matters too, right?
Yeah.
And I just feel like I don't know what to say about that really. I think that I feel like it's not always subjective. It's subjective through the right lens, you know. Like for instance, if I'm going to see any of these behind me, like I can tell you exactly what they mean. There's meaning behind them. They don't look like, you know, the art of like, you know, the churches and all that kind of stuff. But there is a meaning behind it. Yeah. You know, on everything. Like,
and definitely a beauty.
Right,
they look great.
This is it's the serpent god of the Mayans, Kukulkan. You know, and then there's a medicine wheel next to it, and you know he's protecting the world from the coronal mass injections that are coming out. You know, and that could be interpreted as evil. You know, so I think where modern art has a benefit is that if you're able to explain it, if you're able to talk to the actual person, and it has some meaning. I mean, if you just shit in a can and call that art, that's not fucking art. I'm sorry, it's not. You know, but I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but you know, like the stuff that I do, it does have meaning to it. A lot of it has. There's more of it than just these behind me, but you know, a lot of it does have like a spiritual meaning. I did one that was, Tommy, I think you've seen it, the Golgotha one that I did.
I don't know if I've seen that one. I've seen your the one you did, the Garden of Eden, which was just amazing.
Oh yeah, that was that one was pretty cool. But like, you know, the thing about it is like you really got to understand stuff. For, you know, there's this one like directly behind me that was just bullshit. You know, this one right here, I was just having fun with that one. You know, it just came out like that. But you know, obviously art is I don't care where it is. Art is subjective, in my opinion.
I think when it comes to art, it's like what is beauty, and I think it's ready to define beauty. Where like, beauty is whatever something is maximizing the form of, and so if your art is it's maximizing the form of whatever the art you are drawing is. There is no real form to a shit in a can, or a toilet. There is no form to an open toilet seat representing, you know, the patriarchy. It's a formless. And they're trying to make it deep by applying meaning to. But when you actually have a form of something, you can apply meaning to and exert the beauty of that form. You can actually have a beautiful art that some people might not like, but that involves preference of what the art is. Why I think a lot of modern art is not deep or meaningful or actually have forms too. I think it's formless, and it is inherently a disordered chaos in a sense. Like they're trying to display a chaos against the normal, against the order, and then they're trying to backpedal. And they create the art, and they say, okay, now I have to create some story behind it and make people like this art. Mm-hmm. And it really affronts people's natural sensibilities towards what is beautiful, what is ordered, what is good. And in doing so, they have corrupted men's sense of actually seeing beauty, because now, well, obviously, I beholder, I can't say that's objectively beautiful, and it doesn't lift you up if you can't view it as something that is objectively good. And so it's a very clever, sneaky way to do it, like designed to destroy art. Like, I don't consider what you're doing is modern art, but I think it has a form to it, has beauty behind it, has meaning behind it, and it's intent into that. But with a lot of modern, it's they put the cart before the horse, they make it, and they back for a story behind it to justify the price and that why so many people love it. But
yeah, I think anytime somebody's putting together art, and I'm sorry, this is kind of like personal to me because I write and I do poetry. I write poetry and I do all this stuff. So you're always trying to find the archetypical story. Mm-hmm. And even Jon, you can look at his paintings. You can tell he's trying to get to the core of something. Yes. But if there's a box with a white dot on it, they're not after anything. They're not trying to encompass anything. It's just a box with a white dot on it. If there's a nude chick sitting in like surrounded by ropes in the middle of an art museum, what is she trying to get to the bottom of? What is she trying to encompass or embody? Nothing. It's just some nude chick sitting there, right? Yeah. And so I think what you're describing, or what is commonly described as modern art, would be better described as postmodern art.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, you know, I kind of got into art. Like, it's just something that I did for, when I was in high school, when I was, after high school and everything, but I never really took it seriously. Then once the pandemic started, I started painting a lot and doing that kind of thing. And I think, so I don't really have like an art background per se. I'm a plumber. That's what I do for a living,
That's just shit right there behind him. He was
Yeah,
just like, I saw this in a toilet earlier. I don't know. I don't know why you like it.
So like but I when I think modern art, I think it kind of more or less like what you just said. It's postmodern art. It's like not, because I mean, even like I don't know, Andy Warhol would be considered what he would be considered, but like there's some beauty to his stuff.
Yeah.
There's some beauty to, I mean, any kind of art really, but when you do it for like a shock value kind of thing, that's where or like it's a political commentary that you have to explain to people in order for them to get it. Because a lot of that shit, no one's looking at it and be like, oh, that's what this means. Just like mine, until you hear the actual story behind it, that's when it's going to put meaning behind it. With my stuff is like, I want the senses. I want the bright colors. I want you to be able to see, look at it and see something different every time, and I think there is a feeling that people do get when they look at my art, because I put something into it, not just because it's just shapes on a paper.
It makes me think. I'm a movie guy more than a painting or poetry guy. So I think of movies. You look at how they made Frozen and Frozen 2. Most popular Disney movies of all time, allegedly. They wrote the
Frozen. That was Frozen was that movie where the plane crashed and they ate each other.
I wish that would have been so much better.
Well, my daughters are going to be mad at you, Tommy.
No, I watched the making of both of those movies, the behind the scenes and everything, and they wrote the songs before anything.
On both.
Yeah.
Oh,
really?
So they wrote the songs and then built the whole movie, the whole story around the songs. Especially for Frozen 2, they almost, like the main song that everyone loves from it, Show Yourself, they almost had to cut from the movie because they couldn't figure out how to make it fit in the story that they were writing around the other song that they wrote for it. And I think that's kind of what Caleb was talking about. They're putting the cart before the horse. They're making this, hey, here's our product. Here's what we're selling. This is what is going to make people come to this and get stuck in their heads. Now we have to pad around it. And I just watched, in my class, I teach middle school, we watched Sleeping Beauty, the old one. And I was watching it and I'm like, this is a fantastic movie. And I could watch that movie over and over and over again because of there's the themes behind it. It's a story. It means something. Jordan Peterson does a breakdown on Frozen, and he's like, you watch this story and things just come out of nowhere for a shock value. There's not an archetype behind what's happening. It's just it's shock and awe storytelling is what I call it. Because I mean, in my opinion, creativity is a godly attribute that we look in scripture. God is creative. Satan is corrupting. He can twist things, but he never makes anything. And so when people lose that creativity, that's a divine quality that God put in us, but we can cut ourselves off from God, cut ourselves off from that goodness, those good qualities, and we end up going just with, okay, how can I shock people? How depraved can I make something to just freak them out, or flashy or whatever, instead of what's a new way I can present something.
And there's kind of room for both. Because like Tommy was talking about, like the the inversion of things.
Right.
It's not two separate things. It's the same thing looked at from a different perspective a lot of times. And just like you were talking about with the Jesus and the Antichrist. You know,
Yeah.
it's good is not the lack of evil, right? It's the alternative. It's the flip side of the coin. Now I don't know how I feel about that though, you know, because I think sometimes it would be much easier to just be like, yeah, this is good and this is bad, and good is the lack of bad, and vice versa, you know.
Yeah.
I think the more you start thinking about that, you know, the harder that is to deal with.
That line blurs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you walking that line? It's like, just think about your own life. The way I look at it is that's the way I look at it. I think about my own life and the things that I've tried to do for good that have turned bad. And it's like, oh man, that really seemed like a good idea. I really thought I was doing the right thing. You know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions type of deal. And it flips around on you. And you realize that just because your end goal was a specific thing, you took, I mean, you went a quarter millimeter off the beaten path, but that quarter millimeter a mile down the road is 20 foot wide. You know, it's suddenly you're looking at a situation and you're like, oh shit, now what? This isn't where I wanted to be. How did I get here? And you're trying to backtrack, trying to figure things out. And that's kind of the way I look at the Christ and the Antichrist. It looks right. It sounds right. It feels right. And then you get to the end goal and you're like, wait a second. And it feels like that's what happened. I mean, just take progressivism, for instance. If you look at the stated goals of a progressive, if you talk to, like, let's say a Kyle Kalinske or someone like that, like, you're never going to get the idea that of what we have today. But for some reason, they just keep ignoring what's going on today. And it's like, okay, when are you going to admit that taking this path in this direction has gone off the rails?
Yeah.
You know? Because I think someone like that, like, I disagree with him on so much, but I watch him because I think he's trying to be honest, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And it's like, okay, when you look at these guys, why are you so focused on Alex Jones? And there's so much crap going on with people in power. Like, this guy has no power. Like, what is happening? And I see it with the Libertarian Party. I see it a lot with the Libertarian Party, or people that call themselves libertarians. That, okay, your ends are, okay, like, I'm with you. Like, the ends are awesome, but the means to get there, like, you've gone astray, man. You're off the beaten path. Like, we need to back up a little bit and try to figure out what's going on, recuperate. And this is that ideological fanaticism that it takes over. It's a mind virus. And if you're not self-reflective, and getting back to the book, because that's why we're here, right? But if you're not self-reflective, if you're not, like, paying attention to what's going on around you, you can easily get caught up in the hysteria of the crowds and jump on board in trying to destroy someone in their career. But where is that going to leave you? Does that advance anything? Does that help anything? I said it the other day. I was like, you know, y'all are arguing with each other, and you're arguing with a bunch of people that have no power. Like, you're not making a difference. If anything, you're making it easier to be defeated because you're weakening every aspect of anything that wants liberty, or anybody that wants liberty. And so you might have the right intent, but it's an inversion of getting to the good. It's an inversion of liberty, of libertarianism.
We've gone for an hour. We've gone for over an hour now. The podcast normally is only an hour. Barely, but still.
Come on, you got another hour in you. Let's go.
It's 10 o'clock here.
Dude, I just started drinking. Let's get on it.
I mean, I don't mind going for a bit long. I don't mind going for a bit long if everybody else is still good.
No, I'm just playing. Like whatever y'all need to do, I'm good. I haven't eaten yet. My wife just texted me and said the food was fantastic. So, like,
is it what? Well, what was the biggest last question? What was the biggest takeaway from the book that everybody had? Or what is, or if you can't say a good answer for that one, what is the reason someone should read this book? Whoever wants to go first.
My biggest takeaway was was the advice he had for the church. It wasn't framed as advice, but what he said when he was speaking to the church, when he said, like from his perspective, the entire purpose of Christianity is the uplifting of the individual, and yet the church falls into the trap of working on the same mass appeal that everything else does. Mm-hmm. And the church speaking on the same wavelength as everything else just gets drowned out. And it needs to focus on what it actually does, which is an individual relationship with Christ. I think that that is what stuck with me. That you save one soul at a time, basically, or God saves one soul at a time. Was what I took out of that, and that really spoke to me there.
Jon, what about you?
I think that for me, it's the whole thing with Jung, whether it's this book or any other book, is that what he's talking about is creating a healthy person. In order to be a healthy person, you have to be mentally right. And I think that with this book, it's a good primer for getting into other things that he talks about. This book in particular, I like that he makes a distinction between the state and church, and says that they can both be used for bad if you don't know yourself, and that in either regard, the only way that either one can be healthy, whether it's a state or a church, is by healthy individuals making the body of it. Mm-hmm. I think that's the most important thing. And I'm not talking obviously physical health, although that helps a lot. But if you're not mentally healthy, you can't be good for anybody, let alone yourself. And I think that's what he starts getting at in this book, is just that.
Tommy, what about you?
I think, I don't know. My biggest takeaway, I think, was that there's this, that when you start going down the path of really getting to know yourself, it is going to be a journey that leads you to transcendence, and not necessarily God in the colloquial sense, and what people think of as God. I have my own opinions on what God is and what that means, and we could have that conversation some other time. That would be another hour at least.
Anytime you want to do it.
But that there's something within a person, within your will, that is bigger than humanity, and that can lead you to. He makes in the final essay, he's talking about someone who has gotten to know themselves can make impact subconsciously on the world around them. And that really struck me. I was just like, wow, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's like the wealth, power, and influence kind of thing is what he was like kind of hinting at, to be honest with you, is that you're able to take care of other people. You're able to show other people the way, and get people to do what you know to be correct by taking care of yourself.
Yeah, but he makes a point to make sure that you understand that this is a subconscious thing, that when you start thinking about it, you destroy that ability, right? That this is something that when you're in the right frame of mind, when you're on the right track, people just follow.
Yeah.
And that focusing on how do I get people to follow me probably is not going to end well. That what you need to do is you need to focus on how do I make me better? And as you make yourself better, then that influence, it shines into the world and you make a difference in the world. And, people really need to, including myself. I mean, I'm not one to preach. I got to better myself just like everybody does. So that really struck me. I was like, oh, wow. Like that having that kind of impact on the world around you is important, especially if you're making a good impact, because he makes a point that if enough individuals do this, then you impact the entire world, and the world changes because of the influence. And this is something that Christianity teaches, that it's one soul, one spirit, one person at a time. And so he really emphasized that from a psychological standpoint. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. It was a fantastic book. Book was called Undiscovered Self by Carl Jung. It's very small, not easy to pick up on Amazon and listening. I highly recommend you pick it up and read it. Before I wrap up,
certainly doesn't sound small listening to us.
No. But before we wrap, let's give our plugs. Tommy, where can people find you at?
That would be the libertarianinstitute.org/year-0/. You got to have that / at the end. I don't know what Harley did, but I got to have a / at the end there. So libertarianinstitute.org/year-0/.
Got it. Caleb, what's your plugs?
At Caleb_Salmon on Twitter. That's it.
You guys are doing more. Zon, where can people find your plugs at? Where can I find you at?
You can find me at Twitter at spiritual_Ronin. You can check me out on YouTube. I have a few videos on there right now. That's Mind Your Business with Jon Hartmann, JonHartmann. Check out my artwork on Instagram. The link will
be in the description.
I'm sorry?
The link will be in the description if anybody wants to check it out.
That one, the Instagram is Seven Finger Studio, at Seven Finger Studio. And that's Instagram. Yeah, and that's pretty much it.
I have it up now, and I'm looking through it, and the art is incredible. Are you selling any art yet, or are you just posting art?
I've had some people ask about some pieces, and I'm working on getting a website going, and I'm working on digital prints because some of these. There's a couple that my kids really like that I can't get rid of. They want them for themselves, and then I feel like if I do the digital prints, that'll be easier for people to pay for them. Yeah. Because I can charge 10% what I would for an original, or even less.
Well, let me know when you put that up, because I want to pick some of these up. I'm on Instagram now, and they look great.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah, and hit me up. I'll get you hooked up with somebody. I'll get your website up and running. No time.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll talk to you about that.
Wonderful. Well, this is another episode of Faith, Liberty, and Praxis. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, the whole YouTube stick. I don't kind of any episode in the work or on the schedule, but I have a lot of books that I am reading. Soon I'm going to do After Liberalism, Multiculturalism, Death of the Rest, and Reclaiming America as Death of Ramondo. And so I got a bunch of paleo good right-wing books coming out, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you subscribe for that. But that's about it. Everyone have a good night.
What the fuck kind of music is that? Here's Tom Burton.
If you're gonna play this game of pick and choose, well, it's a game that was made for you to lose. It doesn't really matter how fingers in hypocrisy, bragging on their feats of mediocrity again. Never really making any kind of change, but they keep on getting re-elected, and I find that strange. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedoms. Fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedoms. What's it gonna take for you to see that we're living in a rigged democracy? People stand in line for the things that they've been choosing, paying no attention to the rights they keep on losing. They all gather in the rallies and they chant their names on goddamn well that it's all gonna be the same. Just 4 more years of war and taxes, 4 more years of them grinding down their axes. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedom. Don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedom. Yeah, I said fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedom. Fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that